first reader for tonight. Peter Campion is the author of Radical is Reality, Form and Freedom in American Poetry, 4 collections of poems, Other People, The Lions, El Dorado, and One Summer Evening at the Falls, and several monographs and catalog essays on modern and contemporary visual art. His work has appeared in publications including Art News, Boston Globe, Harvard Review, Kenyon Review, Modern Painters, New Republic, New York Times Book Review, Poetry, Sculpture, Slate, and Yale Review, among others. A recipient of the Guggenheim Fellowship and the Joseph Brodsky Rome Prize, he teaches in the writing program at the University of Minnesota and serves as the executive editor of Unbound Edition Press. I've also heard rumors that in his ample free time he also plays some jazz guitar. How does he do it? Please welcome Peter Campion.
Thank you so much, Janna, and thanks everyone for coming out. I won't read for too long because I want to hear Janna and Connie read, but let me just first thank you, Janna, for putting this together. It's not easy work, and you've been doing it for a while. You did it at the Banff Center in Fridley, which was a wonderful place to read, and here, and look at this lovely crowd. Thanks everyone for coming out, and I'm going to read a few poems. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. I'm going to read a few poems, some older ones and some new ones, and some love poems. So, the first poem I'm going to read is called Call Screen, which is, as you probably know, when you get a call on your phone. The call screen is what tells you who it is. Call screen. The way at night on highways through mountains, sometimes a mountain isn't there. Its difference from the dark, so faint. And then a light goes on. A glinting square reveals a ridgeline. When you called, and we spoke with the same familiar ease after so many years, all anger for now, past us, the highway corridor I sped through, office towers and outlet malls, vacant at night, sheer glass and concrete palisades, rose up animate, pulsing from the inmost spark of unsuspected luck, to hear your voice as if no time had passed, your play of confidence with bashfulness, your little tunes in uh-huh and oh and ah, though afterward the world outside the car went blank once more, a dwelling carved from empty space, if only I could find it, waited to appear again, the way at night on highways through mountains, sometimes a mountain isn't there. Its difference from the dark, so faint. And then a light goes on, a glinting square. This is the newest poem in the book. I'm going to say a very frightening phrase. It's from a long poem. I'm not going to read the long poem. I haven't even written the long poem. But it's the first section, and you have to imagine that you're driving a little bit west of the Twin Cities. You're passing Chaska and Chanhassen, and the snow is making it hard to see where you're going, and you've suddenly found something that you didn't know would be there, a movie theater in a strip mall in the middle of a snowstorm. Snow Palace Theater. Ice on the road from Eden Prairie. Grocery chains. What's wrong with Adriana? Down front, everything everyone's saying circles your skull and tangles. Mechanical. That's how it feels. You thought you made choices. You drove through a storm to get here, and who knows what you've taken. At least heat rises from the floor, and the lights drop, and Look how long you've come to hear your words turn strangers' words in the dark. Feel your story grow to something more than a sum of moments. Look how long you've come and far to catch the triple feature of your life: sex, lies, and videotape. The Killers, 1964. And for the finale, the magnificent Ambersons. On such a machine, little off-kilter zoetrope projected by a single flashlight beam. I'm going to read a couple older poems. This is one of these poems that begins, the title begins the first sentence. And the title is Just Now. Just now, a ladybug, its carapace blown open so a translucent trace of orange gleams from its body, has ascended link by link the smudgy silver curve of my watch band. It must have helicoptered past the sill while I was slumped here, squinting in the paper at the ashen packaging another bombing's made of a minivan. Made available in the photo, like the homeless in a poem. The pain is far away, but then, for moments, utterly clear, molten metal guttering down from the Milky Way to fall on us. And sometimes, God, it lands with all its will. My spluttered prayer for it to hold its distance, how ludicrous to blurt it from this comfort. Still, it impels itself from me. Please stay away from me. Please stay away from this insectile soul who only weeks ago was wind and shit and jasmine leaves and rain. Lilacs. It used to burn. Sorry. We'll edit that out of the tape. Lilacs. It used to burn, especially in spring, the sense that life was happening elsewhere. Smudged afternoons when lilacs leaped their smell past schoolyard brick, whole plot lines seemed to twist just out of reach. Inside the facing houses, chamber on networked chamber rose to what? Some angel chorus flowing around the sun? Some lurid fuck? For years, that huge desire simmered, then somehow didn't dissipate so much as fuse itself to thought and touch. This May, our life is here, a branching center, freeways and cellular towers, and the blue avenues at dusk with their scuttle and blur. They all, if just for seconds, fall away. You stand in purple shade by your dresser, and filtering off the park, the breeze returns it. Lilac, its astringent sweetness, circling us as if it were fulfillment of desire, but not fulfillment, just the distance here between us, petaled, stippling to the touch. This is a poem about waking up. It's also about language. Chorus. Before they register as cars, trucks, planes, the steel containers streaming through at 5 are lines of force in a green-black industrial dream corridor. And language also, whipping round as if on winds from outer space, some Thrasher magazine ad copy, or Wordsworth's city now doth like a garment wear, Boomerangs passed with blips of family on the line are who's divorced and who's in prison, and he was the, who was the, she was. Here's the nightmare I want no one to shake me from. I run through subway station tunnels, following trails of sentences sliced off by walls, until in this palatial and vacant hotel, the PA booms the splutters and rasps of accusation. You chose to walk on wire. You tailored your slender hell, leaving my jaw all bitten down, all clenched in anger, even as Jack and Lizzie rustle in their rooms and the sun comes. God, like Julie Andrews in the flowers, the hills are alive this morning. Sparrows sing from our gutters. Just read a couple more poems. Okay, 3. This one is called January Afternoon. Over the backyard where the complex going up fronts on the frozen river, shadows of willow boughs pummeled in wind, so vivid for shadows, calligraphic slashes imprinting on the snow in ragged laterals fling forward, then collect back into dangling clumps like octopus tentacles, down slung before the forward lunge again. More greyhound now, more charger or the hungry lion, and I know my own projector spools these shapes, my need to cast some spell against despair, blot out the leaden, oh no, it's going all in one direction, and the willows swing back on themselves the same, and spring again, squid, jellyfish, jaguar, scrawling on the snow. So 2 more. This one's a little bit longer, and then I'll read a pretty short one. This, Dr. Johnson said that poetry should not mix with party politics, but you'll be able to tell from the title that this is a poem that does better under a Democratic administration. Amtrak. White guy, late middle age, designer slacks and t-shirt, pacing the platform as the city woke, its hydrangeas and sirens, its famous concert halls. And then 5 cops in Kevlar out of nowhere tackled him, and there were orders on a megaphone and guns. My face grew sweaty, tingling from the flush of blood, while boys in letter jackets huddled around their friend to watch the party filmed. A girl yanked down her hood to hide her tears, though now a cop was giving thumbs up, all clear, now whistles and shouts as railroad guys waved everyone on board. Come on, the doors were closing. Like a demolished wedding cake, cream stucco streaked with rust scrolled past, and shacks and cherry dogwood branches draping a wire fence, and all around were fields. And at that moment, joy for summer and the feeling life lay open, everywhere a destination, everyone newcomer, though just as the bust had been so fast and startling before, so small and far away, my upsurge of euphoria plunged into emptiness. My glee about the world was all just me, like cell phone garble echoing back, until the train lurched and screeched to a full stop. Luggage toppled from luggage racks, and a blank stare, an uh-oh, or a swallowed giggle ricocheted between the girl in cowgirl boots, huge tracksuit man, Ghanaian mom in loud pink aso oke gown. This happened years ago, and still, sometimes in dreams or traffic or video conference, blah, blah, comes the almost but not quite relief, the tremulous alertness lingering between passengers as the train gains speed again, as if everything, all love and grief and rote routine and dumb unknowing, came down to a quaver of windows throbbing past, but still in place, new towns, new people getting on and others going. And for moments, the actual ride returns, tight shimmies down the narrow corridors of sleeper cars, upholstery smell of ancient cigarettes. A woman says to someone about who knows what, "It's not the movies when that happens, it's your body." She flicks a sugar packet with her fingernail. At the same time, it's the movies. If your muscle memory leaves you way behind, you're watching you. The sky grows dark. Some doze beneath their coats like husks. With impressive speed, the pages of a mystery fan to the end. Out there, beneath the mountains, a castle or hanging web of terraced silver threads, a huge industrial plant or oil refinery fires the distance. Clusters of little swiveling beams or headlamps. People at work so late into the night. And this last poem that I'll read before introducing Janna is called Dandelions. After the cling of roots and then the pop when they gave way, the recoil up the hand was a small shock of emptiness beginning to expand. Milk frothing from the stems, leaves inky green and spiked. Like blissed out childhood play turned mean, they snarled in tangled curls on the driveway. It happens still, the desolating, falling shudder inside, and then our neighborhood is only sprawling loops like the patterns eaten on driftwood. Even the home where we grew up, its smell of lingering wood smoke and bacon grease falls to a shell of lath and paper. But this strange release follows, this pure luxuriance to feel the pull of dirt again, sense mist uncurling to reveal no architecture hidden behind the world, except the stories that we make unfolding, as if our sole real power were the power of children holding this flower that is a weed, that is a flower. Thank you. Well, it's really a great pleasure to introduce Janna, not only because I really like her poems, but also because as she mentioned, Connie and I have had the pleasure of seeing this book come to life and become 3D, and that's really, really awesome. Janna Knittel lives in Minnesota, but still calls the Pacific Northwest home. I think we'll see that in the poems. And in addition to real work, which is just a beautiful book that's just come out from Noden Press with this incredible photo on the cover that you took, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, check it out. I love it. All right, Janna has published also the chapbook Fish and Wildlife from Finishing Line Press, and had poems in Blue Line, Breakwater Review, Constellations, Cottonwood, North Dakota Review, Pleiades, Whale Road Review, and The Wild Word, among other journals, as well as the anthologies The Experiment Will Not Be Bound, which is just coming out this week, and Waters Deep, a Great Lakes anthology, which was from Split Rock Review. I love so much about your poems, Janna, but I think that everyone will cotton onto that for themselves in just a minute. The one thing I'd like to say is the title of your book is a great title, and it does justice to all of us who scribble and scribble away hoping for something. And thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Did you remember that I love dandelions? I love the new work too, but dandelions is always one of my go-to poems. So the title of my book was inspired by a line from a poem by Alice Oswald, the English poet Alice Oswald. She has a book-length poem called Dart, which is about the river Dart. This is what keeps you and me alive. This is the real work of the river. And there are a lot of rivers in the poems. The title also resonates with the fact that when I was about 7, my parents went insane and bought a 14-acre commercial hazelnut farm and moved us from in town out to the country, which was a wild ride in many ways. There's a lot of, there is grief and loss in the book too, and there's work involved in that, but also it's a joke because most writers have been told at some point, when you're going to get a real job, that's not real work, and I am here to attest that it is, and it isn't, and it is. The book is divided into 3 sections, and my plan was to read 2 poems from each section, and then hopefully I'll have time for 2 newer poems. I'll start with Buying the Farm. My mother's whim while buying you-pick berries on a farm on Kiger Island was to buy our own 14 acres of snags. No city kids, my parents. Between her childhood in Iowa, his summers in hop fields, they surely knew the ropes. But what a shaky vessel. Kristen cried, I pretended, when they said we'd leave Elmwood Drive for Route 3. On wet winter days, the whole house hunched, crept with shadows. We baked batches of snickerdoodles in the yellow kitchen. Frozen pipes, leaky faucets. We found our cat's kittens warming by the water heater. Pastel fragments of Easter eggs devoured by raccoons and skunks. Easter colors in my father's eyes as he posed for photos on the tractor. Oops, I better not put the bookmark where I'll mistake it for another poem I'm going to read. I like to say I was raised nominally Protestant. I'm not a very religious person, as you'll get from this poem. But this is called One Day a Year I Liked Going to Church. In late summer, we retreat to an outdoor sanctuary, the woods behind First Congregational. 2 men build fires, spear whole salmon, laid flat, roast them over coals, coastal native style. Families offer bread and jello, cake and potato salad. Before the meal, kids grow wings on their keds, scatter down dirt paths. Some leap like stags through brush. We all ignore warnings to keep our clothing dry and hurtle into the creek. We are lords of crash and splash, skin knees and palms, seekers of periwinkles among pebbles. Aside from the feast, no one in church talks about the Kalapuya, the people who named Mary's River and Valley, Chipanifu, place of the elderberry. I learned from a stone plaque. We clamor to picnic tables. Christ's fishes swim with Pacific salmon as church kids and I down cup after Dixie cup of Hawaiian punch, our first My Last Communion. This is another farm-related poem, though it was inspired kind of by when my parents sold the farm. Currant jelly. Her jars looked like cut glass in the light. The jellies red, a silk scarf held to sun. Just one currant bush grew by the kitchen door. Ripened berries draped each branch like elven Christmas baubles. She boiled a liquor of fruit and sugar, hung the obscene jelly bag to strain it, then poured liquid garnet into glass. When time came to sell the farm, she sent me the last jar, heirloom jewel. I meant to preserve it. Once opened, the jelly slipped easily past my lips, riding rafts of buttered toast. Along the wall of jams and jellies in the store, I find Tiptree and Cross and Blackwell's from England. Nothing close to home. There are a lot of poems calling on nature imagery, and my travels back and forth between Oregon and Minnesota, and my love of landscapes and animals come through, I think. And so I wanted to read this poem. It's called Grimoire. If you're not familiar with that word, it's the name for a witch's book of spells. Grimoire. The spell for protection. Hold a wren's egg under your tongue. The spell for direction. Cast salt to the four winds. The spell for youth. Walk backwards through a mirror. The spell for wealth. Hold a flame over all your clothing. The spell for friendship. Stand outside and whistle like a white-throated sparrow. The spell for love. Peel pine cones until your fingertips bleed. The spell for courage. Throw your knife into white water. The spell for healing. Lie down in a snowfall until drifts cover your eyes. These last two from the book were ones that were published online in the Wild Word, which I think is based out of Berlin. So I was really excited to go international. First anniversary. How should we mark the 365 days of this new phase? No rituals feel fitting to our peculiar love. I will light a candle, bake kolaches, while you look over my shoulder. I can walk in the woods, wear the belt you gave me, your knife, talk to your ashes. Tell me how to mark this long year since you left on what you called the next adventure. And the last line of that poem is allegedly what my father said to the chaplain who visited him when he was in hospice, and the chaplain told my sister and I that he had asked my father, is there anything you feel like you need to do, anyone you need to see? He's like, no, I think I'm ready for the next adventure, which is great. On the other hand, I also tell people he might have just been trying to get rid of the chaplain. I don't know. Thin places. Heaven and earth overlap. You stand on an invisible bridge between two worlds loosely stitched. You know it in a breath when ordinary stones in Scotland sweep more magic through you than Stonehenge, or years drag before you know you touched the hem of heaven. After his triple bypass, I asked my father to visit the wild bird refuge, where we walked between moss-dressed trees, where I held my breath, where I photographed him kneeling beneath a curved-out branch, after which he lived 26 years longer. So I would like to read two newer poems. My brand new, just bought yesterday, printer cartridge was not working. So I'm going to do something that I truly despise, and I'm going to read from my phone, and I'm so ashamed. I really don't like doing this, but and actually I was going to print out everything in 18-point font so I wouldn't have to wear my glasses and I could look at you better. All right, so just two newer ones, somewhat randomly chosen. Got to keep up the real work. Leaving a northern town. The city I love sometimes slides away behind me. I hate to leave when slag heaps look like mini Alps, bridges wear icicle beards. November sun rides my left shoulder as Dave Simonette sings, "Drinks are spilling on a floor in a town I love so far from here." As I skim past a lake with no name, a bald eagle swoops round me. By exit 209, snow flurries. I hunch to peer between windshield smears. Now sun stabs my left eye. Nothing good happens when I travel south. The eagle doesn't care about me, only mice. I send a paganish prayer anyway. Get me home, wherever that is. Keep me right side up, out of ditches. Don't let me die buried under coffee cups and chocolate wrappers. I need to live to travel north again, one way. One more for tonight. Did anybody go to the Botticelli exhibit at MIA? Yeah, good. Yeah, it's very good. I went last week. Last week they were open, and I came away in a somewhat snarky mood because I felt like, wow, if you really enjoy being elbowed and watching people take photographs of pictures, this is a really great experience. But I kind of use this poem, to work through all that. So, seeing Botticelli for the first time, Minneapolis Institute of Arts. Even if you don't believe in saints or half-god babies, you must admit the azurite is very blue. The transparent red lake, truly transparent, like voile. Both colors laid on canvas in folds, like draped robes. Even if you don't believe in goddesses or unruly centaurs, you must admit Pallas's floral dress is divinely sexy. Her hands in the centaur's hair, both playful and bossy. He looks like every brewery owner in Minneapolis. Every bluegrass musician in Duluth. High time a priestess of truth tamed him and his mane. Thank you very much. Right, it is my pleasure to now introduce Connie Wanek. I'm so glad you could be here. I've been wanting to read with her for a long time. Connie Wanek was born in Wisconsin, raised in New Mexico, and lived for over a quarter century in Duluth, Minnesota. She is the author of 7 books, including Rival Gardens, New and Selected Poems from University of Nebraska Press. And you need this book. It will be everything for you. In 2022, a book of poems for younger readers, co-authored with Ted Kuzer, was published by Candlewick Books. And I believe copies of that are here tonight. Wanek's poems have appeared in Poetry, the Atlantic Monthly, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and many other publications over the years. She was named a Witter Binner Fellow of the Library of Congress and also received the George Morrison Artist of the Year Award. In 2017, a wildflower trail in Duluth's Hartley Nature Center was named in her honor. Please welcome Connie.
Wildflower trail. That's the best, isn't it? Thanks, Janna. Thanks for inviting me to read. It was such fun, reading your book, and when it finally came out in like 3D, like Peter says, it's just the most exciting thing.
I like to say real work is now a real book.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna start with a poem called "Old Duluth," and it's for Louis Jenkins because Anne's here tonight, and I know you all think of him often, as we do. Old Duluth. We still walk down the hillside where bedrock surfaces like the back of a huge gray pike come to glare at you before it breaks your line. A raven alights on top of a white pine, then flings himself off, while a cottontail springs away through the clearing where teenagers leave their empty vodka bottles. Everything that enters through my eyes arrives at my brain upside down, which is how the lake has become the sky at last. Here's the very trail we used to take to come and listen and laugh when you were alive. And here is the end of it. I look down into the future, and there's the past rising up one last time. Out there they have a book of mine, of Mrs. God poems, which unfortunately I hadn't written them all when that book came out, so I have a couple of extras. So this is one of them. Your lucky day. Early on, God created luck. His plan was intervention when he was too distracted to pay close attention to every gambler or gardener or every third grade boy taking a Friday spelling test. Some luck would be good, some very bad. Mrs. God believed in merit, in caution and yield signs whenever two or more were gathered in his name, especially if one had brought beer. Don't you worry, she asked the Lord, whether people will mix up ordinary luck and divine grace. Good point, but no, God said, though I grant you that overall everything does seem pretty random. So I used to be a pretty serious tennis player. Anne and I used to play tennis. And this poem is called Tennis Lesson, about college tennis. It's called Tennis Lesson. One day he set out to correct my backhand, a dangerous undertaking. He was my boyfriend. What happens out there, he said, gesturing to the empty court, and in fact to the entire future, depends utterly upon what happens here. Here meant inside the small imaginary circle or heart in which we then stood or prayed. I had first to delete the old stroke and my long practiced imperfections. Stop thinking so much. don't want things, relax. He didn't say good, he said effective. Ideally, after the lesson, I could be someone else altogether. So my mom died this year, and she was 97 and had a long, fruitful life. And I don't really want to be one of those people who just writes about their dead mom or dead dad. I don't want to be that person, but I am that person. And this poem is called Cleaning Out Mom's Second to Last House. You have to do that. Mom's friend Dorothy signed her note Dot, XOXO. Here in the snapshot, they sat at the old kitchen table and smoked, drank coffee, talked, faces close, while their current combined 9, not the final total, children ran loose. Smoke rose and curled like a fresh permanent. Then tap, tap, tap with a fingertip and crush at last the half-inch of cigarette left, break its little neck in the shared ashtray. Or like my Uncle Bob, short and heavy, rubbing out his tiny fire in the sulfur yellow egg yolk left on his breakfast plate that one of the girl children then lifted out of his way. Let's just say Uncle Bob avoided old age altogether. Did Mom ever smoke here in her second to last house? Doesn't smell like it. Once when I was maybe 8, I saw her throw the butt into the toilet and flush, goodbye, and here I am with my little pencil telling on her. This poem has to do with, Janna, like you, I had a little experience of living on some acreage left over from a farm in Green Bay, outside of Green Bay, Wisconsin, when I was a little girl, and before we moved to New Mexico. And so this was an attempt to make the place kind of pay a little bit. It's called Pomeranian Lady. After the cows and before the ponies, the barn was briefly leased to the Pomeranian Lady. Her plan was to sell tiny dogs for large profits, which makes me think of a 40s book I found among decades of pristine National Geographics in Mom's office called How to Sing for Money. The ruckus was nonstop, but it intensified at feeding time when she shouldered the barn door open. Can a dog get hoarse and lose its voice? Yeah. During those days, even the pigeons in the loft flew off. You have to give her credit for trying, I suppose. Books could be to blame. Tidy little volumes, barking, barking. So this is where I live now. It's called Evidence of Virtue. She watched her little dog, his arching back and elevated tail, and slipped her hand deep into the plastic bag, warm from her pocket. Looking up at a neighbor's house, she saw 2 silhouettes watching as she waiting too. The dog seemed to take forever. At last she stepped into the glorious red pool of maple leaves in their yard, trespassing arguably, and bent over, picking up the steaming pieces. The leash had a range of lengths from 1 second to a whole season, though it caught on fence and gate and mailbox and tugged hard. Every inch of October was spoken for, someone else's property. She quickened her stride, and the melancholic bag, a soft pendulum, rocked back and forth. Imagine her dog had only ever known praise. This poem grew out of a number of things, but one thing was some lines in As You Like It. Joyce and Walt and Phil and I read a whole lot of Shakespeare out loud during the pandemic, which was just a fantastic thing. And you all know the speech about the 7 ages of man. So there's a little epigraph on this poem. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Old at heart. Sometimes the baby would stare at the beige wall while her mother changed her diaper. Of course, diapers are humiliating, but she couldn't have known that, not yet. She didn't care to smile either and show those bare, sore gums. Her dreams were full of backlit giants and the creaking of doors and floors, such that waking was the only escape. She woke easily, thankfully, and wept often. But she loved to be gently situated in a seat with wheels tucked in for a walk around the block toward an open sky. Often she'd point with one finger toward, well, that was another mystery. This is another Mrs. God poem, For a Change. Earth had become a job that required constant customer support. Humans did not seem to understand the basics of their service. Mrs. God suggested a standard message when people first connected. The kingdom of God is within you. Honestly, I think it gives them a sense of agency, she said. But God thought the problem stemmed from a confusing owner's manual. Some of these translations are inscrutable, he said, paging through the dense instructions. What about a series of drawings where steps would be illustrated with a puzzled little angel, sort of like IKEA? And of course, an extensive FAQ on the website. It's worth a try, said Mrs. God. The most important thing is that people know they're getting accurate information. For a change, said God. So those are some new poems. I also wanted to read one or two little poems from this book that they have out there, Marshmallow Clouds, which as the title I don't like at all, but I had nothing to do with that. So, but I do like a lot of the things about this book, including the pictures, which are just so beautiful. And it was a book that sort of came about because Ted Kuzner and I are friends, and he said, hey, how about we write a book of kids' poems together, because we're both, childish. And I said, I don't think I can do that with you. You're a famous poet. And he said, no, you can do it. So I tried, and then Candlewick published this book, and it was kind of great. It's been a real pleasure. And so I thought I would read you a couple kids' poems. This is a poem, and these poems are not attributed to either Ted or me, so I can poach off of his quality. But this one is my poem. It's called The Village Tennis Court. This is about teaching my daughter how to play tennis. She can really play, except she doesn't know how to keep score. She's highly skilled. The Village Tennis Court. The old net was a sagging obstacle, till one day it fell altogether, and nothing stood between us. The court was an open road now, lines painted down the middle and on each side, and the ball was traffic, one car rolling to a stop with a flat tire. We never kept score. You never had to crush me, and I never had to cheat. Grass grew in every crooked crack, impossible to pull. If you tugged, it broke off in your hand like a lizard's tail. This grass was the prairie coming back to life, mowing down all lofty human notions, blade by blade. The last poem I'm going to read is actually Ted's, but it's my favorite poem in the book. It's the last poem too, and it's called Trees. Trees are born blind and in need of each other. With luck, they come up in a forest with brothers and sisters to listen to. Growing up for a tree is mostly reaching out and out to touch another, and that's enough of a life. None of them know where they are, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. They don't ask for much, a good rain now and then, and what they like most are the sweet smells of the others and the warm touch of the light, and to join the soft singing that goes on and on.
Very, very short. We could interview each other.
Well, I have a question. I'm just curious if you all, as part of your poetic practice, memorize poems, and if so, what poems do you like to memorize?
I haven't memorized a new one in a long time. But I used to be able to do Gerard Manley Hopkins' A Windhover Passing Fair, I think, and Jabberwocky.
Jabberwocky.
Well, maybe in college, when I had some spare intelligence, you know. But then I memorized some Andrew Marvell when we did just because the Mowers songs, they're super. And when Juliana comes and what I do to the grass does to my thoughts and me, you know, they're very cool. But no, I'm not champion of that. Joyce is a champion.
Yes, I thought somebody might be.
And I envy that.
Oh, come on. Every time I mention a poem, you say it.
I'm just totally faking. But I recommend Shakespeare. I think everyone should do what we did, and we did that kind of on a lark because these two know so much about Shakespeare. They're just brilliant, and Phil and I we hadn't read any Shakespeare since, you know, for 45 years practically, and it's just been fantastic. And you can feel it. You can feel that voice coming into your life, and the lines reverberating, and the plots and stuff. You say,
Well, it was so much fun with you.
It was.
You were such a receptive
you had a lot of
reader
questions.
audience.
Blank slates.
Yeah, we're a blank slate.
Hardly. Yeah.
I think Walt I think he would look like Shakespeare a little bit.
Well, we'll see.
Peter, do you memorize?
Sometimes, yeah. I'm not a great memorizer of poems, but it's really true what you said, Connie, that it gets into your body,
Yeah.
you know, and
That's-
it's
yep.
body knowledge.
Yep.
It's what it's all about. And you can, and a few times I've found that something I memorized comes out in something I've written, but I didn't even know it until
That's interesting.
until afterwards, because it's not just the body knowledge of the syllables or lines, but of the movement of a form, of a, something that goes from one place to another. Yeah, I think it's great. Some people, of course, are like actors, you know, who get the part the day before. How do they do that? I have no idea. That's absurd.
I have a question for you, Peter. Is there a writer who, when you read that writer, you just really want to write? It makes you really
Yeah.
want to write?
Yeah. It's usually somebody whose style is very different than mine.
Okay.
And it's either, I think of that, these are probably kind of crude opposites, but somebody who's really loose, or appears that way, like Allen Ginsberg, or somebody who's really tight,
Huh.
and you know, Ryman Meter, Ivor Winters, or somebody like that. And even if you're not going to write in either way, somehow those, again, it's physical. It's either something that's opening or something that's really flexing and intensifying. It gets me excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you?
I would say that reading something that I really love is the only thing that makes me want to write. Otherwise, I really don't want to write.
Have you ever done this selfish thing that I once did? That a novelist I really like, Anita Bruckner. I read a few of her books, and I started one, and there was a opening paragraph is so good, and I just thought I need to do something. And I went and wrote a poem, and I never read them.
So important.
I feel kind of bad. I
But I
could go
think
back.
that's good, though. You know, say the last paragraph of in the Dubliners and the whole way. You know, that last paragraph of the
Yeah,
snowfall.
yeah.
You know, that makes you want to write. If you write you read a thing like that, and you just say, I just want to do that.
Yeah.
I think some people would want to be a shot putter or something if they saw a really good one.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same. Yeah. You read James Joyce and you suddenly say, can I?
Lizzie.
When did you start writing poetry?
Well, that's a good question. When did you start writing poetry?
Dad, when
Oh.
did you start writing?
I started writing poetry when I was in second grade. Yeah. And I had a uncle who was a World War II veteran who had his leg blown off in the Normandy invasion, and there were these hippies would come to our school, these hippies, these local poets, and teach us, and they were wonderful. I thought they were I remember one of them very vividly, and she wanted us to write poems about peace, so that we would radiate peaceful energy into the world. Sure, I'll do that. And I wrote all about peace and sent it to my uncle, and he wrote back to me and said, well, it's a good poem, but you have to remember that peace is not as important as freedom. So I remember that, the first criticism, and
Yeah.
but it was a voltage, you know, it's really fun.
How about you? Yeah.
Well, it's been more like waves and lapses and things like that. But I did actually write some poems when I was like 6, and I still, my mom typed them up on pretty paper,
Oh, nice.
like 3 poems.
Wow.
One was an ode to string.
You could do that today, honestly. That's not bad.
I didn't call it an ode, but looking back now, it was
It
definitely
was.
a poem of praise for string. What a wonderful thing.
Interesting.
and this sounds like such a stereotypical story, but I had an English teacher in high school who literally saved my life because she asked me to come to her classroom after school and bring my guitar and play my songs that I wrote for her, and she wanted to read some of my poetry too, and that was huge because I wasn't really getting that kind of attention anywhere else in
Yeah.
school or at home or anything at the time. So. But I started my MFA program at age 46, so it took me a long time to get around to being serious about it.
Well, you know, I think that's true of a lot of females, because they, you know, you have things to do, like often as kids and make a living, and it's real hard to balance all that stuff
Yeah.
out. And then when your kids get bigger, you suddenly have these windows where something could happen besides the
Yeah.
regular stuff. So I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Yeah, luckily we live longer than that. We make up for it at the end.
One more question.
One more question? Oh, there's a.
Jim?
Oh.
Just thinking of the poems that you've read tonight, I'm curious about what role revision plays in your process. Do they come to you as you presented them, or did you sweat over them for years, or somewhere in between?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I love the ones that I write, and it's almost like, yeah, I'm just gonna move this around and change a few words, make some small cuts, and it's pretty good. And that's like, 5% of the time. And then, 5% of the time there's something where it's like, I just keep reworking it and reworking it and reworking it. And, I have one poem, I'll save the older version sometimes just to kind of see how far I've gone. I got one poem that we're on version 19 or something like that. And then everything else is in between. But it's, I'm having taught creative writing, it's one of the hardest lessons to learn is that, yes, I know you feel like this came from your soul and you can't
Right.
change it, but, you have to. And so sometimes I just am brutal with cuts and changes. And actually, the book, Real Work, is at least a third shorter than the original manuscript that I sent to Norman Stillman, because there were some that I thought were, either just weaker poems I wasn't as jazzed about, or poems that didn't seem to fit the sort of overarching themes as well. And Norton gave me a lot of just freedom in kind of what I wanted to do, and so I just said, well, let's see what happens if I just go, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone. Yeah, I think I do like sometimes it's good to be brutal, and then those other poems can show up somewhere else,
I sometimes think, Jim, I don't know if Jim Seelar's a wonderful poet who asked the question. That's why I could ask you back. I sometimes think, when you're starting out writing, when I'm starting out writing, I can't do it with a blank page. There needs to be something there to tinker with, and so that's revising. It begins to start to feel like crop rotation because you have different cycles that you're on. At least that's why.
It becomes a storage problem, don't you think, all the half-written
Oh,
poems?
yeah.
Like, I have a lot of half-written poems, and at one point, we moved, and I just had Phil go burn them all in the
Oh.
because I thought, that's it. I'm not going to go back through that. I can't So I'm starting fresh. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. Yeah, but now it's kind of a storage problem because I never seem to finish and get it right. Not happy.
I know someone had their hand up back there.
Yeah, well, the last two questions kind of answered it a bit. I was going to ask about your process, like how you get started, where you find inspiration, and I know like revision discussed a little bit how that plays a role. I always find that I don't have any problem revising my essays or my fiction, but when it comes to my poetry, I'm like, wait, I'm not touching that. That's like, you know, it's supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be, yeah. So what's your process like, and how do you become comfortable with revision?
Well, my standards for a first draft are extraordinarily low. So there's always room for revision. I've been writing a poem a day since January 1st, 2022, but when I say poem, you know, again, like extraordinarily low standards. You know, I write by hand. I've got my hardback notebooks that I love. I've got my jelly pen that I love, and I just, I'm gonna go on a rant about the Botticelli exhibit. You know, I do it at night now. I used to do it first thing in the morning, but then everything that I wrote was about how tired I was. So I had to change that. You know, that's like, you know, a whole book of poems about it. I need 6 more hours sleep. But yeah, so everything's handwritten, and then I'll go back and scratch some things out by hand. Then it gets on to a Word doc, and I start doing stuff with it then. But I just remember Jamal May saying, you know, if you have writer's block, lower your standards. He came and visited the U. And I also remember, I think it was Maya Angelou who was asked if she wrote every day, and she said, I do, but you know, some days it's just the fat cat sat on a mat. But you're writing, it's like, you know, I guess this tired metaphor, but it's like working a